Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Momuji, and good morning, everyone. My name is Nauli Rachma Fauzi Simanjuntak, and today I'm going to present my second project for syntax class. This presentation is about deep structure, a fundamental concept in transformational generative grammar. I will try to explain the concept in simple and clear language, and I hope by the end of the presentation, we will all understand how deep structure works and why it's important in understanding sentence meaning in a language. Definition of deep structure. First, what is deep structure? In transformational generative grammar, which is a theory introduced by Noam Chomsky, deep structure refers to the abstract underlying structure of a sentence. This structure represents the basic grammatical relationships, like who is doing what to whom, before the sentence gets changed or transformed into the way we actually say or write it. For example, the sentence, John hit Fred, has a deep structure that shows John is the subject, the one doing the action, hit is the verb, and Fred is the object, the one receiving the action. Even if we change the sentence to Fred was hit by John, the deep structure is still the same because the meaning is the same. John is hitting Fred. 2. Major grammatical relations. At the deep structure level, grammatical roles like subject, verb, and object are clearly assigned. So in the sentence, John hits Fred, John is the subject, hit is the verb, Fred is the object. This helps us understand who is doing the action and who received it, no matter how the sentence is transformed later. Lexical insertion. Now, how are the words inserted into the sentence? Before we have a complete sentence, we first have an abstract rule like S and P plus VP, and P stands for noun phrase and VP is the verb phrase. At the deep structure level, we insert actual words into those parts. For example, MP John, VP hit Fred, so the full sentence John hit Fred is formed at the deep structure level before we do anything like changing it to a question or passive voice. Transformations. Once we have a deep structure, we can apply transformations. These are changes to the sentence form, but not its basic meaning. From the deep structure John hit Fred, we can create a passive sentence. Fred was hit by John. A question, who did John hit? A negative, John didn't hit Fred. So the deep structure stays the same, but the service structure changes depending on what we want to express. 5. Understanding meaning. Why is deep structure important? Because it shows the true meaning of the sentence. Even if the service structure is different, like passive or active voice, the deep structure helps us identify who is the agent, the door of the action, and who is the patient, the one who receives the action. So when we read, Fred was hit by John or John hit Fred, the meaning is the same, and we know it because the deep structure is the same. Deep structure and universal grammar. Deep structure also supports Chomsky's theory of universal grammar, which says that all human languages share some basic structure. For example, English for English, John eats an apple, and for Japanese, John garin go taberu. Even though the service structure and word order are different, the deep structures such as John is the subject, apple is the object, it is the verb is still the same. Semantic interpretation. This slide says that deep structure helps us interpret meaning, and here's what the list means. Understanding idioms or metaphors. Deep structure helps identify what idioms mean, not just what the words say. For example, kick the bucket literally means kick bucket. But at the deep structure level, it means to die, resolving ambiguities. Some sentences can have more than one meaning. Deep structure helps us disambiguate. For example, visiting relatives can be boring. Is it boring to visit them? Or are the relatives who visit boring? Deep structure helps us identify the intended meaning based on context. Interpreting logical forms. This means analyzing the logical relationship in complex sentences. For example, every student read a book. Does it mean the same book? Or each student read a different book? For example, another example, a sentence like flying planes can be dangerous can mean either it's dangerous to fly planes or planes that are flying are dangerous. Deep structure can help us figure out the correct meaning depending on the context. Ambiguities and errors. Studying deep structure helps with these three things. Structural ambiguities. Sentences that can be interpreted in more than one way. For example, I saw the man with the telescope. Did I use a telescope to see the man? Or did the man have the telescope? The deep structure can reveal which meaning is intended. 2. Syntactic constraints. This refers to rules that limit how words can be arranged. Deep structure helps explain why some forms are ungrammatical. The last thing is language processing difficulties. These are sentences that are grammatical but hard to process. For example, the horse raced past the barn fell. This sentence is confusing but grammatically correct. Deep structure shows that the horse that was raced past the barn fell. So, deep structure helps linguists and language learners deal with tricky or confusing sentence patterns. Conclusion. To conclude, deep structure is the foundation of a sentence meaning. It helps us understand who does what in a sentence. It stays the same even when the service sentence changes. It reflects the universal grammar behind all human languages, and it helps us deal with the ambiguities, semantics, and sentence errors. So understanding deep structure is really important if we want to understand how language works deeply, not just how we say things, but what we mean. Service structure. Service structure is something we hear and use every day, but in syntax, it has a more technical meaning. So in this presentation, I will explain what service structure is, how it's different from deep structure, and why it matters for communication, language learning, and grammar. Let's start with the definition. Service structure is the final version of a sentence after all the grammar rules and transformations have been applied. This is the form that we speak, hear, read, or write. It's not abstract like deep structure. It's what we actually use in communication. It's the version that goes through phonological processing, meaning how it sounds when we say it. So when we say, for example, she's going to school, that's already the service structure. Phonological realization. The service structure controls how a sentence is pronounced or written. This includes word order, the position of each word, intonation, how our voice rises or falls, stress, which words are emphasized, and punctuation in writing. For example, she is going to school. This sentence sounds natural and correct because the service structure tells us how to pronounce it clearly. If we change the word order or stress the wrong word, it could sound strange or confusing. Derived from deep structure. Service structure is formed after transformation of rules are applied to the deep structure. We can take one deep structure and create many different service structures. This happens through transformations like WH movement. You will see what becomes what will you see. Passivization. The dog bites the man becomes the man is bitten by the dog. Other processes like negation, inversion, and construction also occur here. So service structure is flexible. We can express the same idea in different ways depending on how we transform the sentence. Supports parsing and comprehension. Service structure helps our brain understand what we hear or what we read. When we see a sentence like the cat chased the mouse, our brain easily processes it because of the familiar subject-verb-object order. When we hear the word the, our brain expects a noun next. These little clues like word order, articles, and punctuations help us comprehend the meaning quickly and accurately. Not always semantically transparent. However, service structure can sometimes be ambiguous or misleading, especially when the grammar is unclear or there's a mistake. For example, drunk gets 9 months in violent case. Wait, Why is the violin case a courtroom case or a literal case for violins? Another one. Teeth removed using the latest Methodist method. Probably meant to say modern method, no, Methodist. Just one word change can make the sentence confusing. So, even though the service structure is visible, it doesn't always make the meaning obvious. That's why deeper understanding is sometimes needed. Role in meaning construction. While deep structure provides core meaning, service structure adds extra layers of meaning truth. Focus. What part of the sentence is emphasized? Only John saw the dog versus John only saw the dog. Presupposition. What the listener already knows. She stopped smoking implies she used to smoke. Topic comment. What the sentence is about and what's sad about it. As for the weather, it's terrible today. Logical scope. How words like only, no, or every affect the meaning. Pronoun reference. Who is he or it? Server structure must make this clear or it causes confusion. For example, only John saw the dog emphasizes on John. John only saw the dog emphasizes on saw, didn't touch or feed it. Language variability at the service. Different languages express the same idea with different service structures. For example, in English, she likes apples. In Japanese, it means as for her, apples are liked. The deep meaning is the same. Someone likes apple, but the service form is totally different. That's why translation isn't just about word-by-word replacement, it's about capturing the meaning even if the structure looks different. Service structure in language learning and teaching. In language learning, students often memorize service forms like full sentence before they understand the grammar behind them. For example, how are you? Many beginners learn this as one unit without knowing the grammar of how, are, or you. This shows that service structure plays a big role in learning languages. It's what students first hear, imitate, and repeat. Understanding service structure helps learners improve in pronunciation, saying the sentence correctly, word order, putting the words in the right place, writing, making grammatically correct and clear sentences. These are key areas in second language education. Service structure in speech and writing. In speech, service structure controls intonation, stress, pauses. In writing, it controls punctuation, grammar, and clarity. For example, let's eat, grandma. You're inviting grandma to eat. Let's eat, grandma. You're going to eat, grandma. Just a comma changes the meaning completely. This shows how powerful service structure is in communication. Conclusion. To conclude, service structure is the final form of a sentence that we say, hear, or write. It comes after all grammar transformations are applied to the deep structure. It plays a big role in communication, language learning, and even humor or ambiguity. Understanding service structure helps us become better speakers, writers, and language users. In this presentation, we will look at 6 different syntax tree diagrams, and I will explain each one using my own words. I will also talk about the deep structure behind every sentence. Deep structure refers to the core grammatical meaning of a sentence before any transformations like movement, passivization, or contractions are applied. So let's begin. For the diagram 1, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. This is a very classic example, often used in typing exercises because it contains all 26 letters of the alphabet. Let's begin with the service structure. The sentence is divided into noun phrase and verb phrase. The noun phrase is the quick brown fox, and the verb phrase is jumps over the lazy dog. Inside the verb phrase, there's a prepositional phrase over the lazy dog. Okay, let's begin with the deep structure. The explanation is in the deep structure, the subject is clearly the quick brown fox, the door of the action. The verb is jumps, the action, and the object of the preposition, the lazy dog, is not a direct object, but part of a locational prepositional phrase. There are no major transformation here. The service structure is very close to its deep structure. It shows a basic subject verb object order with an embedded prepositional phrase. Okay, next is diagram 2. The girl who is wearing a red dress is dancing. This is a more complex sentence with a relative clause. In the service structure, you can say the main noun phrase is the girl who is wearing a red dress, and the main verb phrase is dancing. The relative clause who is wearing a red dress modifies girl. So the deep structure is the sentence originally had two separate ideas in the deep structure. The first idea is the girl is dancing, and the second idea is the girl is wearing a red dress. And the deep structure, both ideas are independent, but in the service form, they are joined using a relative pronoun who, creating an embedded clause. Transformation. The subject who moves to the front of the embedded clause. This is called VH movement, which is a syntactic operation. And next, diagram 3, Stefano saw the Yehezkiela with the telescope. First interpretation, the sentence is structurally ambiguous, and the next diagram will show the second interpretation. Service structure, noun phrase Stefano, the phrase saw the Yehezkiela with the telescope. The prepositional phrase with the telescope is attached to the verb phrase. That means Stefano used the telescope to see. Deep structure, in the deep structure, clearly subject is Stefano, verb saw, instrument with the telescope. So the prepositional phrase modifies verb, not the object. This tells us that Stefano used the telescope to see Yehezkiela. Diagram 2, second interpretation, Stefano saw the Yehezkiela with the telescope. Same word, but different meaning because of a different structure. Here, in the service structure, the prepositional phrase is attached to the object noun phrase, the Yehezkiela, not the verb. So it's like saying Stefano saw the Yehezkiela who had a telescope. Deep structure. The deep structure reflects a different relationship. Stefano is still the subject. The verb is still saw. But now, with the telescope is a modifier of the object, not an instrument of the verb. This shows how syntax can control meaning even if the sentence looks exactly the same on the surface. The next diagram, diagram 5, she believes that the earth is round. This is a complex sentence with a complement clause. The service structure, noun phrase clearly see. Verb phrase believes that the earth is round. The sentence inside the brackets is a complement clause introduced by that. So the deep structure involves two complete sentences. She believes something. The earth is round. Then transformation combines them using complementizer that to turn the second sentence into the object of the first verb. This structure is typically for verb of cognition like believe, know, think, etc. The last diagram, diagram 6, the house where I grew up has been demolished. This one includes a relative clause with a preposition. For the service structure, noun phrase is the house where I grew up, and the verb phrase is has been demolished. And the noun phrase where I grew up is a relative clause describing the house. All right. For the deep structure, there are again two ideas. I grew up somewhere. That place, the house, has been demolished. The relative word where replaces the object of the preposition in or at, like the house in which I grew up. The verb grew up is split by the particle up, making it a phrasal verb. The service structure results from WH movement of where and the embedding the relative clause inside the noun phrase. So in all of those diagrams, we saw how server structure is what we see, say, and hear. Deep structure shows the true roles and relationship between the parts of a sentence. Transformations like WH movement, embedding, and restructuring phrases allows us to create complex but meaningful expressions. Syntax diagrams help us understand both structure and meaning and how language can be interpreted in different ways, even with the same words. Thank you, Momuji, and thank you everyone for your attention. I hope this explanation helped clarify how deep structure works behind each syntax diagram. I'm open to any questions or feedback. Goodbye. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.